You might have heard it late last night. An unusual noise has upstate neighbors working to figure out
many of which are believed to have existed between 6 and 9 million years ago, according to science.
The Euphrates River is disappearing, and with it, things long sealed are coming into view. As the water retreats, structures never meant to surface are being exposed. Hidden tunnels, chambers that resemble prisons, markings that suggest restraint rather than ruin. Nearby, winged stone figures stand without names or records. In Babylon, tablets were not broken, but erased. Skeletons were not buried, but bound. And near Mount Ararat, a boat-shaped formation once again draws the world's attention back to the memory of the flood. Scripture warned that when the Euphrates dries up, restraints would weaken. Is this coincidence or timing? Because what connects next may change how you see this moment. As the Euphrates water level fell, a cave emerged where none had been visible before. What stunned observers was not the opening itself, but what followed inside it. The temperature dropped sharply. Cold seeped through the rock walls. Ice thickened into heavy slabs, spreading across a passage that had never been exposed to open air. A chamber once submerged now resembled an interior winter, preserved and hostile, as if time had stalled. This was not surface frost carried by wind. The snowfall formed within the cave. Ice accumulated along the floor and walls, sealing corridors and narrowing access. Instruments recorded temperatures far below what the surrounding environment could account for. The rock itself appeared to hold the cold, sustaining it. A place shaped by flowing water had become rigid, locked, and silent, an abrupt transformation from movement to restraint. The timing drew immediate attention. As snow and ice appeared beneath the river, the United States was gripped by a severe winter storm. Heavy snowfall spread across multiple states. Temperatures plunged to dangerous lows. Infrastructure strained under ice and cold that arrived faster and lingered longer than expected. The contrast was striking. Winter forming where it should not exist, while winter intensified where it already ruled. Two distant locations. Responding in parallel, ancient texts speak of snow not merely as weather, but as something stored and released with purpose. The book of Job poses a direct question. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, which I have reserved for the time of trouble? Job 38-22-23. The language is deliberate. Snow is described not as random accumulation, but as something kept, withheld, and deployed. Whether read literally or symbolically, the implication is difficult to ignore when cold appears in places sealed from the sky. Natural explanations are considered. Sudden exposure can alter airflow. Pressure changes can drop temperatures. Yet none fully explain sustained snowfall inside a cave that had been underwater, nor ice forming fast enough to block passages that had never known air. The phenomenon does not behave like a simple reaction. It behaves like a condition taking hold. What matters is not proving intent, but recognizing pattern. Snow beneath a river, ice sealing passages, winter intensifying across a continent. These events do not demand a single conclusion, but they do press a single question. If cold can manifest where it does not belong, if sealed places can suddenly resemble storehouses, then revelation may not arrive as spectacle, but as inversion. What was fluid becomes fixed. What was hidden becomes exposed. What was restrained becomes emphasized. If snow can appear in a place it should never exist, the next question is unavoidable. What else, long concealed, is waiting for the moment when restraint gives way. If snow appearing beneath the river suggests restraint being reversed, what emerges along the riverbanks points to something being remembered. As erosion continues along newly exposed sections of the Euphrates, stone statues begin to surface partially buried, weathered, and unmistakably deliberate. These are not fragments of collapsed buildings or decorative reliefs. They are figures, winged humanoid forms, carved with features that blur the boundary between human and animal. Elongated limbs, distorted proportions, faces that do not resemble any known cultural standard of beauty or reverence. What immediately stands out is what these statues are not. They do not match any catalogued deities from Mesopotamian, Babylonian, or Assyrian records. There are no inscriptions to name them, no symbols to associate them with temples, dynasties, or rituals of worship. They are not positioned on pedestals or altars. In fact, they appear abandoned, left at the margins, rather than honored at the center. Their design suggests something different. The figures are not carved to inspire devotion. They do not invite prayer or offering. Instead, their posture and exaggeration convey dominance, intimidation, and presence. Wings spread not in flight, but in display. Animal features fused into human forms in a way that feels intentional rather than symbolic. These are not gods being praised. They are forces being acknowledged. Archaeologists note that ancient cultures often used exaggerated forms to represent power that exceeded human limits. When proportions are distorted, it is rarely accidental. It signals authority, fear, or rebellion against natural order. These statues seem to function less as idols and more as warnings or markers of something believed to exist beyond ordinary boundaries. This interpretation finds an unsettling echo in Scripture. Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11:14. The verse does not describe monsters or obvious evil. It describes deception through appearance, power that disguises itself, authority that mimics what it is not. In that context, winged humanoid figures take on a different meaning. Wings suggest elevation, transcendence, access beyond the human realm, but when fused with animal traits and distorted form, they also suggest corruption of that elevation. Rather than representing gods to be worshipped, these figures may preserve symbolic memory, carved impressions of entities perceived as crossing lines, challenging order, or existing outside divine structure. They stand not as objects of praise, but as reminders of opposition. What makes their appearance now so striking is timing. They are not being uncovered by excavation, but by exposure. As water retreats and layers are stripped away, these figures emerge without ceremony, without announcement, standing silently where they were never meant to be seen again. And if these statues are not meant to be worshipped, but remembered, the question becomes sharper. Remembered by whom and for what purpose? What emerges beneath Babylon does not resemble ruin left behind by time. It resembles something deliberately shut down. Excavations in and around ancient Babylon have revealed 478 artifacts that were intentionally destroyed, not by fire, flood, or collapse, but by careful, selective damage. These objects were not smashed beyond recognition. They were altered, broken in ways that suggest concealment rather than chaos. The destruction follows patterns, consistent angles, repeated methods, as if the goal was not to erase the objects themselves, but to prevent something they contained from being understood. This becomes especially clear with the stone tablets. Many tablets were found intact in shape and structure, yet their inscriptions had been deliberately scratched away. The removal was precise. Entire sections of text were erased, while surrounding material was left untouched. This was not vandalism, it was editing. Someone took the time to remove specific content while preserving the artifact itself, suggesting that what was written mattered enough to hide, but not to destroy completely. Beneath these layers, archaeologists uncovered secret corridors, sealed under multiple phases of architecture. These passages do not align with trade routes, residential planning, or worship practices. They do not lead to temples or markets. They descend, they narrow, they turn sharply, and end abruptly, as if designed to restrict movement rather than enable it. What lay deeper was far more disturbing. Hundreds of human skeletons were discovered, arranged in orderly formations. There were no grave goods, no markers of honor or mourning. The bodies were placed with intent aligned, grouped, and positioned in ways that suggest process rather than ceremony. This was not a burial ground. It was a placement. The most unsettling discovery came from a section now referred to by researchers as the Vault of Horror. Inside this sealed area, bones were found bound together and marked with symbols translated as sealed. The vault was not merely closed, it was protected. Surrounding the remains were pools containing toxic substances, mercury, arsenic, and lead. These poisons were not accidental contaminants. They were deliberately introduced, creating an environment hostile to human access and long-term exposure. This raises a critical question. Why guard bones with poison? The combination of binding, sealing, and chemical deterrence points to a single conclusion. Whatever this vault contained, it was not meant to be entered. Not by the living, not by the curious, not even by those who built it. The poisons were not defensive in a military sense. They were preventative, designed to ensure separation over time. Babylon was a city of knowledge, power, and order. Its architects understood symbolism, structure, and consequence. When they sealed something, they did so deliberately. The vault does not tell a story of fear alone. It tells a story of responsibility, of those who believed something needed to be contained, regardless of cost. And the fact that these chambers are now being exposed, layer by layer, forces a sobering realization. This was not meant to resurface. It was meant to remain beneath history itself. Before we go any further, tap like to support this investigation, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because what Babylon sealed away may explain why so many ancient cultures chose silence over record, and why these discoveries are emerging now, not before. Near the eastern slopes of Mount Ararat lies a formation that has resisted easy classification for decades. Known as the Derupinar Formation, it presents a striking outline, elongated, symmetrical, and unmistakably boat-shaped. What continues to draw attention is not merely its appearance, but how closely its dimensions align with the biblical description of Noah's Ark. The proportions correspond with remarkable consistency, inviting comparison rather than dismissal. Initial observations alone could be attributed to natural geology, but further investigation complicated that assumption. Ground-penetrating radar surveys detected internal anomalies inconsistent with random rock formation. Beneath the surface, researchers identified linear corridors and layered structures arranged in patterns resembling stacked decks. These features appear organized, repeating at measured intervals, suggesting internal segmentation rather than solid mass. While not conclusive proof of human construction, the internal geometry raises questions that geology alone struggles to answer. Soil analysis added another layer of intrigue. Samples taken from within and around the formation revealed unusually high concentrations of organic matter and potassium. Such levels are consistent with long-term decomposition of organic material, including wood. This contrasts sharply with surrounding terrain, where soil composition reflects typical volcanic and sedimentary processes. The localized nature of these findings implies that something once existed here that altered the soil chemistry over an extended period. What makes the Darupanar Formation especially compelling is its location. Genesis records that the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat, Genesis 8-4. The biblical text does not specify a single peak, but a region. The Darupanar site lies precisely within that region. This alignment has led many to see the formation not as definitive proof, but as a physical echo, a remnant, or marker, connected to a memory far older than recorded history. Skeptics rightly caution against premature conclusions. Natural processes can produce surprising shapes. Radar data can be misinterpreted. Organic material can accumulate through non-architectural means. And yet, the persistence of this formation, its symmetry, internal structure, and chemical signature keeps the discussion alive. The question is not whether this is conclusively Noah's Ark. The question is why the memory of a massive flood appears so consistently across cultures, continents, and timelines. Nearly every ancient civilization preserves a flood narrative. Different names, different details, but the same core event: a world overwhelmed by water, survival through a vessel, and renewal afterward. The Darupanar Formation sits at the intersection of geology, archaeology, and collective memory, embodying that shared story in physical form. Jesus himself framed the flood not as myth, but as precedent. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. Matthew 24-37. The comparison is not about architecture, but about awareness. In Noah's time, life continued as normal until judgment arrived. The sign was present, but largely ignored. The Darupanar Formation does not demand belief. It invites reflection. It stands as a silent question etched into the landscape. If the memory of the flood was important enough to be preserved across the world, what else from that era was meant to be remembered, and why does it still surface now? Whether natural or constructed, the formation continues to challenge modern certainty. And in doing so, it reminds us that some questions endure not because they are easily answered, but because they refuse to disappear. Echoes from the abyss and the warning of the Euphrates. Along the Euphrates, residents report an unsettling sensation in the hours and sometimes minutes before sections of the riverbed collapse. It is not always heard. Instead, it is felt deep within the body. A low-frequency vibration moves through the ground and rises upward, as if the earth itself is signaling stress. Others report dizziness, anxiety, or a sudden sense of unease. At the surface, nothing appears wrong. The river may still look calm. This phenomenon is closely associated with infrasound acoustic waves below the threshold of human hearing. Unlike ordinary sound, infrasound is not processed clearly by the ears. It is absorbed by the body. It travels long distances through solid ground, water, and air, penetrating structures and interacting directly with the human nervous system. Along the Euphrates, these low-frequency emissions are reported shortly before sudden water loss, bubbling sediment, or ground failure. What makes this especially significant is consistency. Similar sensations are described by people living along different stretches of the river, separated by distance, culture, and language. Yet, reporting the same pattern: a feeling of approaching change, physical discomfort without visible cause, an internal alert that arrives before any observable collapse. By the time the riverbed gives way, the body has already responded. Researchers acknowledge the presence of infrasound near large-scale geological and hydrological shifts, but its effects remain difficult to measure precisely. Infrasound does more than signal movement. It alters perception. Studies indicate it can stimulate the amygdala, the region of the brain associated with fear and survival instincts. The result is a primal response, one that bypasses logic. The body reacts before the mind can interpret what is happening. This leads to a critical observation. The Euphrates does not announce its changes only through visible collapse. Sometimes, it announces them through vibration, through signals that are felt rather than heard. Long before modern instruments existed, ancient people relied on these bodily sensations to recognize danger. In that sense, the human body functions as an early warning system, responding to shifts in the environment that have not yet reached the surface. Scripture frames moments like this in striking terms. The voice of the Lord is over the waters, the God of glory thunders. Psalm 29:3. In the Bible, movements of water are rarely described as random alone. They often accompany warning, revelation, or judgment. Sound, vibration, and pressure appear as signals that precede action. Not every event carries prophetic meaning, but the language suggests that nature itself can act as a messenger. When infrasound precedes collapse along the Euphrates, it does not destroy. It warns. It unsettles. It prepares. What is striking today is how frequently these sensations are reported, and how closely they align with a period of rapid change along the river. Sections fail faster. Transitions occur without precedent. The signals that come before them grow harder to ignore. Whether viewed scientifically or symbolically, the pattern remains the same. Something moves beneath the Euphrates before the river changes. Something speaks before the collapse occurs. If the body reacts before the landscape transforms, perhaps the warning is not meant to be dismissed. Before you go, tap like to support this investigation, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching and for staying attentive as the story of the Euphrates continues to unfold.